Good evening. Welcome to another PostCult Worldview ride-along. In my last episode, episode 3, I explained why I'm not a theist. And overall, I feel like I got a pretty positive response. There were a few people in the comments who they took exception to the video. And I want to clarify something, that video wasn't meant to be why you shouldn't be a theist. It's just why I'm not a theist. This video, the same is true. This video isn't about why you shouldn't be an atheist. It's why I'm not an atheist. So please bear that in mind. There are going to be people watching this video who probably feel like I should be identifying as atheist after they hear my thoughts. In the secular community, a lot of people believe that everybody who is secular should be openly secular if their living arrangement allows it. You know, they're not going to be kicked out of the house because they're just coming out as an atheist at 18 and parents are funding you through college, that sort of thing. I don't have that situation, so there's nothing holding me back from being openly secular. What I want to say is that I am openly secular in these ways. I believe that the morality that we find in our holy books are human morality, or represents human morality at the stage that it was when that book was written, rather than some type of objective, divinely revealed morality. The same is true when it comes to the interpretation of these books. For example, the reason Christianity or Christians no longer use the Bible to justify slavery isn't because the Bible condemns slavery, it's because our morality is developed to a point where now we realize that to own another person is just flat out wrong. Human rights, our understanding of human rights have developed in a lot of ways that has made various religions become more progressive or to reform. All of this speaks to humans being the source of our morality. So in that sense, I'm secularly minded. I'm also an advocate for the separation of church and state. And I feel that organizations that violate human rights, such as the Watchtower Organization or Scientology, should have charitable status revoked to try to at least force these organizations to reform. So in these ways, I'm secular. I'm openly secular. I don't hide these facts. But that doesn't mean I have to identify as atheist. I realize that atheists are among the most mistrusted people in the United States, and that there is a desire to demystify what atheism is, that it has nothing to do with being amoral, for example, or evil. I get that, but still, that doesn't mean I have to identify as atheist. And this video is going to explain why I don't. Now, there's two main reasons, and they have to do with things that atheism is closely associated with. Not synonymous with, but closely associated with. One of these is antitheism, which is basically not only debunking religion, but also pointing out immoral aspects of religion, pointing to the harm that religion has done, pointing to passages of holy books that have damaging or immoral implications. And if I'm being honest, I have shared in anti-theist sentiments when debating with theists in, for example, a worldview discussion group where everybody knows it's going to be a controversial conversation, and I think that has value in helping people to solidify their own evolving worldview. Coming out of a theistic worldview, I think it can be helpful to kind of deconstruct it, and anti-theism can be a great avenue for doing that. And I love guys like Sam Harris or the late great Christopher Hitchens. I love listening to him talk. I love hearing them debate apologists like William Lane Craig, who is himself an excellent debater if you can stand him. I think these debates need to be on the record, and we need to have free access to that information so that we can really rethink our belief systems. However, anti-theism and atheism both are the rejection of something, or at least the lack of acceptance, the lack of belief in something. So they're both kind of a negative position, which for me isn't that exciting. I think it's interesting to think about, but as far as identifying with it, moving forward with my life, that is not appealing to me. So that is one issue. Here's another issue. And I should say this too, regarding anti-theism. I don't agree with every sentiment of anti-theism. For example, I do think that religion has been a force for good in many ways. Yes, terrible things have been done in the name of religion, but I think it was a crucial part of our evolutionary development, our cultural evolution, helping us codify morality, albeit imperfect morality that needs to be reformed and revised. But the community, the culture, the morals, these are all things that we get from religion that we needed religion for. We figured that out as a species, that we needed this. And I'm not convinced that there will ever be a time when we don't need it in some form. Okay, now moving on to my second point. The second thing that atheism is often associated with, and almost synonymous with, is materialism. And when I say that, I'm not referring to what Jehovah's Witnesses think when you say the word materialism. I'm not talking about an overemphasis on material things, or an obsession with gaining more money and more possessions. I mean, that's no good either. But that's not the definition I'm using here. If you look up materialism, the second definition you'll get is basically a philosophical materialism, which is that it's a dogma, really. It's the doctrine that nothing exists except matter and its movements and modifications. Or put simply, only matter exists. I am not comfortable with that. I feel like it is limiting to a person's worldview. Now, I understand why science at this time operates in that framework. But in developing my worldview and looking at the bigger picture, it feels limiting. In two areas in particular. One being the question of why is there something instead of nothing? And what is consciousness? These two questions are so profound to me that they're almost holy. There's a quote that I want to share with you from a man by the name of J.B.S. Haldane. And I came across this quote in watching a video from our TED Talk from not Christopher Hitchens, it was the other guy, the prominent atheist, activist, and evolutionary biologist, Richard Dawkins. It's an excellent TED Talk. It's titled, I think, something like "Queerer Than We Can Suppose: Why the Universe Seems So Strange." And I love listening to Richard Dawkins speak. He's so passionate about the physical universe. And frankly, I find the physical universe to be exciting too. Even if materialism is true, I still find it profoundly exciting to be living in this universe, to the point that even that is almost spiritual. And he talks about how the world we live in, this medium-sized world in the cosmos that you and I experience life in, is really kind of driven by gravity. We're constantly working within the framework of gravity, and that if you were much smaller, say a water beetle or something like that, gravity wouldn't be the thing that defines your world. Now it would be surface tension, which would be a totally different experience. So if you kind of expand that to the cosmos, it just shows how difficult it is for us to comprehend the size of the universe and what the universe is really like on the macro scale. It's an amazing universe that we live in, even if a materialist worldview is the true one. So that's the context that I originally heard this quote in. Now I'm going to come back to that TED Talk in just a second, because there's an interesting feature of the introduction of that TED Talk where he has this quote. Again, this is JBS Haldane, who says, "Now, my own suspicion is that the universe is not only queerer than we can suppose, it's not only queerer than we suppose, but queerer than we can suppose. I have read and heard many attempts at a systematic account of it, from materialism and theosophy to the Christian system or that of Kant, and I have always felt that they were much too simple. I suspect that there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of or can be dreamt of in any philosophy. That is the reason why I have no philosophy myself and must be my excuse for dreaming." Love it. Love this quote. So he mentions Christianity. He mentions theosophy, which is basically a kind of mysticism that modern day or modern New Age thinking kind of has its roots in theosophy. It mentions Kant, who is a philosopher, Immanuel Kant, basically a forefather of modern philosophy, and it mentions materialism. Now, when Richard Dawkins started his talk with this quote, he didn't quote the whole thing. He quoted the beginning about the universe being queerer than we can suppose, and then he jumped to the end where it talks about there being more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy. He skipped over that part where materialism is lumped in with Christianity as an overly simple account of the universe. He doesn't want to discredit materialism. Now, he may have just been trying to save time, but the fact is, he's a materialist. I'm not. I'm open to the possibility that the materialist worldview is absolutely true. But when I think about consciousness, I have a hard time framing that in a strictly materialist worldview. And also this question of why is there something instead of nothing? And I can talk more about that in future videos. Now, when I looked up that quote for this video so I could print it off, I came across another quote by JBS Haldane that will help me make my point. It's another one that excites me. He says, "It seems to me immensely unlikely that mind is a mere byproduct of matter. For if my mental processes are determined wholly by the motions of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true. They may be sound chemically, but that does not make them sound logically." I'm with him. I can't get my head around mind or consciousness being an emergent property of the universe. In other words, for eons, the universe was just dead matter, and then all of a sudden, boom, we popped up, and maybe other extraterrestrial intelligent life with big enough brains popped up, and then suddenly there was consciousness. How does consciousness emerge from dead matter? What is consciousness? These are major questions that are referred to as the hard problem. I think that's what they refer to it as. Scientists, philosophers especially. The hard problem of what is consciousness. And I don't want to talk about it too much because future videos are going to get into it more. Now I want to mention about JBS Haldane. This isn't some guy that's just into woo-woo, weird, magical thinking. JBS Haldane, he is a scientist that wrote extensively on evolutionary biology, and he is one of the most important figures in the study of abiogenesis, which is basically what happened before evolutionary biology. Abiogenesis is the original evolution of living organisms from inorganic or inanimate substances. So that happened before biological evolution. That question of how did inorganic material become biological material. So apparently he accepts evolutionary biology, as I do, and he finds abiogenesis plausible, as well. I do as well. But that still doesn't answer the question of consciousness or where the universe came from. Those are bigger questions. I think I'm going to leave it at that for now. I don't know that you'll all be satisfied with that, as far as why that's enough reason for me to not call myself an atheist. I guess I should say that if consciousness is not an emergent property, and consciousness is something that exists outside of brain matter and predates brain matter, then is that God? Maybe that's God. I find that an exciting idea. Exciting enough that I want to let my mind be free to ponder it in a way that I feel identifying as atheist would prevent me from doing. I think that'll conclude this video. Now in the next video I'm going to get into agnosticism, then I want to get into deism and pantheism. And I want to say here that if you are enjoying these videos, both my ones on undue influence and the Watchtower, and these videos on forming a post-cult worldview, I would appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. I've never asked for that before, but I don't mind it when other people do it in videos, so I want to try to get in the habit of it, asking for subscriptions and likes and share if you can, because I do want to show that it's possible to rebuild your worldview after having your worldview crumble, after being in a cult, and basically becoming a blank slate. You know, this is something that anybody can do, and you're going to find your way to do it. And there may be things that I say that resonate with people, or there may be things that you disagree with completely, and we can have a discussion about it. That's something we couldn't do as Jehovah's Witnesses. So, again, I want this message to get out there, and I will appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you again soon.